Unaware his wife was the secret owner of the company his entire family worked for, he divorced her to marry his mistress. But the morning after their wedding, the very foundation of his family's empire began to crumble. For years, she'd played the quiet, loyal wife, signing papers, serving dinners, attending board events, while his parents mocked her for being ordinary and unworthy of their son. But behind that gentle smile was the woman who held every contract, every share, every secret that kept their legacy alive. Now, as they celebrated his new marriage under chandeliers she technically owned, she was somewhere else, signing a document that would make their entire family her employees overnight. But why did she hide her ownership for so long? What pushed her to finally reveal the truth now? And when he realizes she owns not just the company, but his downfall, what will he do next? The night he threw her out, rain lashed against the glass walls of their penthouse, turning the skyline into a blur of cold lights. She stood barefoot in the living room, trembling, not from fear, but from disbelief. His voice sliced through the silence, sharp and final. "Pack your things, Evelyn. I'm done pretending." Her throat tightened. "Pretending?" she repeated softly, watching him toss her clothes into a suitcase. The same hands that once held her face with tenderness now moved with fury and arrogance. "You can't mean this, Daniel. After everything," he interrupted, his laugh bitter. "You mean after wasting 5 years of my life? After dragging me down with your small dreams? I'm not living like this anymore. I'm marrying someone who actually understands what success means." He glanced at his watch, as if her heartbreak was a meeting he needed to finish quickly. Outside the door, his mistress waited, sleek, young, and impatient, sitting in the car like victory itself. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the painting above the fireplace, a stormy seascape her grandfather had painted years ago. The man who'd raised her had always told her, "Power is quiet, child. Never let them see you roar until it's too late." She had spent her life following that rule. For years, she'd hidden her inheritance, her shares, her position as silent owner of the company his family worshipped like religion. She wanted to know if love could exist without wealth, and for a while she believed it could. But that illusion was dissolving before her eyes. "Daniel," she said quietly, as he zipped the suitcase, "everything you have, your position, your car, your family's business, do you even know how you got it?" He smirked, mistaking her calm for weakness. "By being the best, by earning it. Unlike you, Evelyn, I actually work for a living." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite sorrow. "You'll find out soon," she whispered. He rolled his eyes, dragging the suitcase toward the door. "Don't play cryptic now. You're leaving. Tonight. I already had the locks changed. The car's waiting." He opened the door and the cold air rushed in. The mistress, her name was Clarissa, leaned against the car window, eyes glinting with triumph. Evelyn stepped outside slowly, the marble floor beneath her bare feet slick from the rain. She watched as Daniel loaded her suitcase into the trunk, not to help her, but to discard her. "Goodbye, Evelyn," he said. "Don't make this harder than it is." She met his gaze for the last time, memorizing the face of the man who had once sworn forever. "It's not hard," she murmured. "You've made it very easy." When he turned away to kiss Clarissa, the world seemed to go silent. The rain softened, the city lights blurred, and something within her, something buried under years of patience, finally woke. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked down the steps, the drizzle matting her hair to her face, and got into the waiting cab. Her driver, Marcus, glanced at her through the mirror, concern flickering in his eyes. "Home, ma'am?" A long pause, then softly, "No, to the office." He hesitated. At this hour, her tone sharpened with a calm authority he'd never heard before. "Now, Marcus!" The car glided into the night, the city's reflections rippling across the windows. Evelyn leaned back and closed her eyes, her mind no longer tangled in heartbreak, but in calculation. Daniel thought he'd thrown her away like something disposable, but he'd just freed her. When they reached the company headquarters, a glass tower bearing her family's name, she walked past the guards who greeted her as Mrs. Cross, not realizing they were saluting their boss. She entered the top floor office, turned on the light, and stared at the plaque on the desk that read, Evelyn M. Cross, chairwoman. She sat in the leather chair, exhaled deeply, and pressed the intercom. Get Mr. Whitaker on the phone, she said. Your lawyer? Her secretary's sleepy voice asked. No, she replied, eyes glinting. My CFO. As the city darkened below, the quiet hum of power returned to her like muscle memory. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her chest, and somewhere across town, as Daniel wrapped his arm around Clarissa and toasted to his new beginning, the first of many phone calls that would destroy him began to ring. In the soft glow of her office, Evelyn stared at the skyline, her reflection faintly superimposed over the city she quietly owned. The same city that adored her husband's family name, not realizing every building, contract, and paycheck that bore it ultimately bowed to her. Her mind drifted back, before the power, before the deception, to the days when she believed love was the one thing she didn't have to protect with secrecy. She met Daniel 8 years ago at a charity gala she attended under a different last name, her mother's maiden name. Hart. Her grandfather had insisted on it after her parents' deaths. You'll never know who loves you for you if they see your name first, he'd told her, tapping his cane against the marble floor of his study. Anonymity is your shield until you find someone who deserves the truth. Daniel was charming then, reckless in a way that felt alive. He wasn't from money, at least not in comparison to her lineage, but he had ambition that burned through every word he spoke. When he talked about wanting to climb the ranks at Cross Industries, she had smiled quietly, knowing she could make that happen with a single phone call. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she tested him. She wanted to believe his hunger was real, not opportunistic. They dated for a year before marriage, a whirlwind of rooftop dinners, small apartments, and dreams of building a future together. He'd touch her cheek and promise, one day I'll give you everything you deserve. She'd smile, thinking, you already have. You just don't know it yet. When her grandfather passed, the will was clear. She would inherit the controlling shares of Cross Industries, but her name would remain off every public document for 5 years. It was his final test of discretion, and she honored it. Her position as silent owner gave her the freedom to observe, to watch who thrived, who schemed, who deserved her trust. Daniel got his first promotion 6 months after their wedding. He thought it was his brilliance that earned it. Evelyn had quietly signed the approval behind closed doors. She'd read every report, studied his work ethic, and believed he was worthy of the advancement. When he came home that night, ecstatic, he lifted her into his arms, whispering, You see, baby? I told you we'd make it. She smiled, holding back the truth that she had made it happen. Then came the next raise, the corner office, the company car. Each achievement meticulously curated by her unseen hand. She told herself it wasn't deceit, it was love in another form, a gift he'd someday understand. But slowly, as power touched him, Daniel began to change. It started small. The jokes about her simple lifestyle, the way he'd correct her at dinner parties, reminding her to speak more confidently around executives. He'd brush off her opinions during business discussions, even though she knew more about the company than anyone else in the room. She noticed the shift, the way he began to crave recognition more than connection. Her assistant once remarked, Mrs. Cross, your husband's been rather vocal at the last board meeting. He's talking about restructuring departments. Evelyn had nodded, concealing her discomfort. She had allowed Daniel a long leash, hoping humility would balance his ambition. Instead, arrogance took its place. She'd watch him from her hidden office feed, each board meeting broadcast live for internal review. Daniel would gesture like a man born to lead, using her ideas without realizing their origin. The board respected him because she had told them to. They laughed at his jokes because she had approved his promotions. The irony was exquisite and tragic. Then Clarissa appeared, a new marketing consultant, sharp, beautiful, and dangerously observant. Evelyn noticed her before Daniel did. She saw the way Clarissa's gaze lingered on him during presentations. The calculated laughter, the late-night messages under the guise of project updates. Evelyn didn't interfere, not yet. She wanted to see what kind of man her husband truly was when temptation arrived. It didn't take long. She remembered the night she found the first receipt, an upscale hotel 2 hours away, the date conveniently matching one of his business trips. Her chest had gone hollow. She didn't confront him immediately. She hired a private investigator instead. Within a week, she had photos, timestamps, and recordings that stripped away every remaining illusion. She sat at her grandfather's old desk that night, staring at the evidence. The old man's portrait seemed to look down at her, his eyes full of quiet judgment and pride. "Power is quiet, child," his voice echoed in her memory. "Never roar until it's too late." Her phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. "Dinner might run late. Don't wait up." Evelyn had smiled then, not bitterly, but with a kind of sorrowful clarity. The test was over. The mask could finally come off. The next morning, she called her attorney and said 5 words that shifted the universe. "Activate the succession clause." Quietly. That clause transferred all her grandfather's shares into her public name, making her the visible majority shareholder and CEO of Cross Industries, effective immediately. The 5-year anonymity rule had expired exactly 1 week earlier. The timing was poetic, divine even. As she signed the final documents, a calm unlike any she'd ever known settled over her. The man who mocked her simplicity, who measured her worth in silence and servitude, had no idea that every paycheck he'd ever earned came from her account. Every achievement was hers long before it was his, and soon he would learn the truth, not in a shouting match, not through revenge in the traditional sense, but in a boardroom filled with witnesses, cameras, and silence thick enough to make a man crumble. She glanced at the framed seascape again, the same painting she'd looked at when he threw her out. The storm her grandfather had captured in oil and canvas looked almost alive now. The waves no longer threatened to drown her. They were rising to carry her forward. The morning after Daniel's second wedding felt like the beginning of a new empire to him, and the beginning of its end to everyone else. He stood on the balcony of the honeymoon suite, coffee in hand, admiring the skyline as if he'd built it himself. Clarissa moved behind him, draped in silk and satisfaction, her laughter light and cruel. "You really did it," she whispered, wrapping her arms around him. "Free at last." Daniel smirked. "Free and finally on top. The board loves me. The old man's finally retiring, and soon enough, I'll have the CEO chair. Everything I've worked for is about to pay off." He didn't know that, at that very moment, the documents he just boasted about, the ones finalizing the leadership transition, were being pulled back by Evelyn's legal team. Every clause, every dotted line, every assumption of control now pointed directly to her. At Cross Industries headquarters, the atmosphere was oddly charged. Evelyn entered through the private elevator, flanked by 2 senior executives who had served her grandfather for decades. The moment she stepped out, the board secretary straightened. "Mrs. Cross," she greeted softly, the weight of the name heavy in the air. Evelyn nodded once, her calm presence commanding attention. "Schedule an all-hands meeting for Friday. Make sure every department head, every executive, and every shareholder representative is there. Full attendance." The secretary blinked. "Understood. May I ask what it's regarding?" Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "Transparency." While the team hurried to comply, Evelyn entered her office and called Mr. Whitaker, her CFO. The man's deep voice came through immediately. "I take it the clause has been activated." "Yes," she said, glancing out the window where the city shimmered beneath the early sun. "And Daniel is about to walk into a storm he helped build." Whitaker hesitated. "Do you wish to proceed with a forensic audit?" "Quietly," she replied. "I want every account, every transaction, every unauthorized expense traced, especially corporate cards under his name and Clarissa's department." There was a pause. "You believe she's been redirecting ad funds into private accounts," Evelyn said flatly. "He probably thinks it's nothing, but I know Clarissa's kind. She's not just his mistress, she's an opportunist." Her tone didn't waver. There was no bitterness, only precision, the kind of stillness before a blade strikes. By midweek, whispers began to ripple through the office corridors. Daniel's absence was noted. The marketing department was abuzz with rumors that Clarissa had pushed through a new proposal worth millions without senior authorization. Evelyn let it unfold. She knew that sometimes the best way to destroy an illusion was to let it believe it was thriving. Daniel's return on Thursday was theatrical. He arrived in a tailored suit, Clarissa by his side, wearing an expression that could curdle milk. Employees paused in the hallway as the two walked past, radiating confidence. Evelyn happened to be in the corridor just then, clipboard in hand, speaking with her assistant. Daniel's steps slowed. For a heartbeat, the air thickened. It was the first time they had stood within 3 feet of each other since that night. She looked impeccable, hair sleek, a dark navy suit hugging her frame, diamond studs catching the light. She looked like someone who'd never been thrown out of anywhere in her life. "Evelyn," he greeted, voice strained, rehearsed. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cross." The formality sliced through him. Her tone wasn't angry, it was professional, and that unnerved him more than any confrontation could have. Clarissa tightened her grip on his arm, her smile brittle. "You look different," Daniel said after a pause. "Perspective changes people," she replied, "especially after storms." Before he could respond, her assistant approached with a folder. "Mrs. Cross, the preliminary audit results you requested." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Audit?" She took the folder without looking at him. "Yes, internal housekeeping. You'll hear more tomorrow." Her eyes flickered briefly toward Clarissa, then back to him. "Both of you." And with that, she walked away. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He replayed her words over and over. Internal housekeeping. It sounded harmless. It also sounded final. When he arrived at the office the next morning, the air was different. Tense, expectant. The company logo gleamed behind the reception desk, and for the first time, he noticed something odd. The silver plaque beneath the logo read, "Cross Industries, founded by the Cross family, privately held under Evelyn M. Cross Holdings." His stomach dropped. How had he never seen that before? Clarissa's heels clicked behind him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he muttered, forcing a laugh. "Just a nameplate." But his palms were slick, and the edges of certainty were fraying. When the boardroom doors opened, every executive, investor, and department head was already seated. The hum of low conversation fell silent as Evelyn entered, calm and deliberate, every eye following her. She took the head seat, Daniel's usual chair. He blinked, confused, forcing a smirk. "That's my seat." Her gaze lifted to meet his. "Not anymore." The CFO stood beside her, placing a thick stack of documents on the table. "Before we begin," he said, his tone formal, "Mrs. Cross has requested full transparency regarding the recent audit. You may want to pay close attention." Clarissa shifted uneasily beside Daniel. Her hand trembled as Evelyn opened the folder, revealing printed emails, receipts, and digital transfers. "This," Evelyn began, her voice even, "is the financial trail of misuse that's been draining this company's marketing funds for the past year, all under the authority of 2 signatures, Daniel Cross and Clarissa Hale." The silence was suffocating. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You can't be serious. This must be." Evelyn's voice cut through like a blade. "Oh, I'm very serious. And what's more interesting, Daniel, is that the board is now aware of something you've all overlooked for years." She paused, letting the silence breathe. "The fact that this company, the one you and your family claim as yours, has always belonged to me." The room froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Daniel's throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn leaned forward, eyes steady, her calm now terrifying. "I own Cross Industries. I've owned it since before you ever applied for your first internship here." Every head turned toward her, then to him. His face drained of color. She continued, her tone like steel wrapped in silk. "You were never climbing a corporate ladder, Daniel. You were climbing my staircase." The boardroom was silent, eerily so, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself has stopped breathing. Evelyn stood, her hand resting lightly on the table. Every executive, every shareholder, every department head leaned forward, waiting. Daniel's face had gone pale. Clarissa's carefully built poise was crumbling by the second. When my grandfather founded this company, Evelyn began, her voice calm but resonant, he built it on a single principle: trust. He believed power should never be flaunted. That's why, for years, my ownership was kept private. My name was buried in holding companies, my shares concealed under trustees, all to protect what he built from greed. Her gaze swept across the room. And yet, greed still found its way in. She clicked a small remote, and the large screen behind her came alive, displaying emails, receipts, and security footage. Daniel's voice echoed faintly from one of the clips. "She doesn't know a thing about this place. She's just a housewife." A low murmur rippled across the room. Evelyn's tone didn't waver. "For years I let that narrative stand. I wanted to see what kind of man my husband would become when given the chance to lead. I gave him opportunities, promotions, access to decisions. Every step was mine to grant, and he took each one as proof of his own genius." Daniel slammed his palm on the table. "You can't do this. I worked for everything I have." Her eyes snapped to him, unflinching. "You worked for me." The words landed like a thunderclap. Clarissa's hand found his under the table, trembling. "Daniel, she's bluffing, right?" Evelyn turned to her, expression cool. "You should know better than anyone, Clarissa. The marketing budget you siphoned into personal accounts, those numbers don't lie. Neither do the hotel bills listed under company reimbursements." Clarissa's face flushed crimson. "You can't prove that." "Oh, I already did," Evelyn replied evenly, glancing at the CFO. "Mr. Whitaker, please distribute the audit findings." Folders slid across the polished table, landing in front of each executive. The weight of paper and truth hit simultaneously. One of the board members, an older man who had once idolized Daniel, adjusted his glasses and murmured, "Good God." Evelyn clasped her hands in front of her. Effective immediately, Daniel Cross is terminated from his position. His shares are revoked under Clause 9(b) of his employment contract, breach of fiduciary duty. Clarissa Hale, likewise terminated, pending legal investigation for embezzlement. Daniel shot to his feet, voice breaking. "You can't just erase me like this. My family built this company." Evelyn's expression didn't soften. "Your family worked for mine. Every generation of your bloodline has served under Cross Holdings. You just never bothered to read the fine print." His chest rose and fell rapidly. "You planned this," he spat. "All of it. From the beginning." She took a breath, her voice quiet but unflinching. "No, I loved you, Daniel. I wanted to believe you were different, but you gave me every reason to finish what my grandfather started." Clarissa stood abruptly, grabbing her purse, her voice shrill. "You'll regret this. We'll sue." Evelyn smiled faintly. "By all means, just make sure you can afford the legal fees. Your accounts are frozen pending audit." The security team entered quietly, their presence unmistakable but respectful. One officer gestured toward the door. Daniel's voice cracked as he whispered, "Evelyn, please. You can't do this to me." She tilted her head, studying him for a long, silent moment. The man before her was no longer the one she'd fallen in love with. His arrogance had burned away, leaving only disbelief and desperation. "I'm not doing anything to you," she said softly. "I'm just taking back what was always mine." He swallowed hard. "What do you want from me? Revenge?" Her expression softened, but her voice remained firm. "No, Daniel. I don't want revenge. I want peace. You took my heart, my trust, and my silence, and turned them into weapons. I'm simply returning them to their rightful owner." Security led them out, cameras capturing every second. The moment was broadcast internally, recorded for shareholders and auditors. The visual would become corporate legend. The man who mocked his wife for her simplicity, escorted out of her company by the same guards who once saluted him. When the doors closed behind them, Evelyn exhaled slowly, the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then steady, then thunderous. Later that evening, her phone buzzed. It was Daniel's mother. "Evelyn," the older woman said softly, "I just saw the news. I don't know what to say." Evelyn hesitated. "You don't have to say anything." "I owe you an apology," the woman whispered. "We all do. We treated you like you didn't belong, when you were the only reason this family ever had stability." I hope you can forgive him one day. Evelyn looked out over the city through her office window. The skyline shimmered, alive, electric, hers. Forgiveness isn't hard, she said gently. It's forgetting that takes time. Months passed. Daniel faced financial ruin, lawsuits, repossessions, public humiliation. No one in the industry would hire him. Clarissa vanished overseas under mounting investigations. Meanwhile, Evelyn thrived. She rebranded the company, launched new initiatives, and became an advocate for women in leadership, funding programs that helped single mothers rebuild careers. The press called her the silent powerhouse, a symbol of grace under fire. Years later, after a conference, she found herself in the underground parking garage of a hotel. As she approached her car, a voice stopped her. Evelyn, she turned. Daniel stood there, aged, humbled, a shadow of the man he once was. His suit was worn, his eyes tired. I came to say thank you, he said quietly. You could have destroyed me completely, but you didn't. She studied him, the silence stretching between them like an unspoken eulogy. I didn't need to, she said. You did that yourself. He nodded, eyes glistening. I know. She opened her purse and handed him a sealed envelope. This is from me. It's not forgiveness. It's closure. He looked confused, then opened it. Inside was a check. Not for millions, but for enough to start again. She smiled faintly. I built my empire by helping people rise, Daniel. Even the ones who tried to bury me. He lowered his gaze. You really were the best thing that ever happened to me. Evelyn stepped into her car, pausing just long enough to say, then maybe next time, you'll recognize power when you see it. As the door closed and her driver pulled away, the camera of fate seemed to pan upward, the skyline glittering above her, the name Evelyn M. Cross Holdings shining across the city like quiet thunder. She didn't roar. She never had to. She just finally let the world hear the silence of power. The wind was softer these days. It carried no ghosts, no memories that clawed for attention. Only peace. She stood at the balcony of her new penthouse, overlooking the city skyline her family once quietly ruled. Below, the lights of her company's headquarters glowed like constellations, steady, eternal, hers. The building no longer carried the weight of hidden ownership. Her name, her real name, shone proudly on the side in gold letters. The world knew now. The woman once dismissed as just a wife had been the silent architect of an empire. Years had passed since that fateful morning when he threw her out with words meant to break her. Time had weathered everything. The scandal, the media frenzy, the social media debates that dissected her revenge like a corporate thriller. But through it all, she'd moved forward, calm and unshaken, building something bigger than retribution. Legacy. The company had flourished under her open leadership. Her policies had changed the lives of thousands. Equal pay initiatives, maternity reforms, mental health support for employees. Her face, once hidden, now stood for something larger than herself. The world called her the woman who rewrote the rules. Still, sometimes, she wondered if he ever truly understood the magnitude of what he'd lost. She saw him once, years after everything. It was in the parking lot beneath her office, the same place where the final confrontation had unfolded. But this time, he wasn't angry. He looked tired. The arrogance had drained from his eyes, leaving behind the hollow reflection of a man who'd finally seen himself clearly. He had tried to rebuild. The whispers said he'd worked at smaller firms, tried starting his own business, but every door closed before him. No company wanted to hire the man who had betrayed his own CEO. He'd approached her slowly that day, hands trembling, eyes glassy. You won, he'd said quietly. She remembered how her heart had softened, not from pity, but from peace. It was never about winning, she told him. It was about truth. She'd given him a check before walking away, not as charity, but as a reminder. Enough to start again, if he truly wished to. He'd taken it without a word. She never saw him again. Now, as she leaned on the balcony rail, a warm hand slid around her waist. Her new husband, Ethan, kissed her shoulder gently. He wasn't from her world of wealth and power. He was an architect, grounded, kind, the sort of man who measured success not by ownership but by purpose. "You're thinking again," he murmured. She smiled. "Always." He glanced at the city lights below. "Do you ever regret not revealing who you were sooner?" Her gaze followed his, eyes reflecting the quiet sprawl of the city she'd shaped. "No," she said softly. "Some truths need time to grow strong enough to stand in the light. If I'd told him then, he would have only seen power. He would never have seen me." He nodded, understanding. He always did. From somewhere behind them, laughter echoed, their daughter chasing her little brother across the marble floor, their giggles blending with the hum of the night. The sound filled her chest with something she hadn't felt in years. Fullness. The woman who once hid behind someone else's name had built a life under her own. She turned back toward the city and smiled faintly. Unaware his wife was the secret owner of the company his entire family worked for, she whispered almost to herself. He divorced her to marry his mistress. Ethan raised a brow. "That sounds like the beginning of one of your interviews." She laughed softly, the sound lighter now. "No," she said. "That's just a reminder of how stories change. When the woman finally tells her own." The wind lifted her hair as the city lights shimmered below. And somewhere in the distance, the past dissolved for good, leaving only the woman who had turned betrayal into brilliance, heartbreak into empire, and silence into power.